So today's episode is completely unscripted, and this is me speaking from my heart and answering a question that I sometimes get asked, which is, why did you decide to become a coach? If I'm to be 100% transparent, I didn't decide to become a coach. It almost feels like coaching has chosen me in some way. And if you are part of my team, you know that it's a title that I really resist because I don't see myself as a coach. I think that my perception of a coach was someone who has it all together and they're now in this position to impart all of this valuable information. I don't have it all together. I don't. But what I share with you on this platform and on all the platforms that I share on is what I'm learning, the lessons that I'm learning as I'm going through life, as I'm aspiring to be my most extraordinary self. And so, how did I end up in coaching? Well, here's what happened. As some of you may know, I was a management consultant for many years. I was certified as a business analyst, I did project management, and then my husband and I started our own company, which became successful very quickly. We built another company after that. And so I was really in the business and IT world. I really had nothing to do with personal development. My very first experience of personal development was actually a friend of mine. And he doesn't know this. I've never shared this with him. So now you're going to know, Perrin. But my friend Perrin, who actually worked with me for our company, was someone I admired. He worked with my team, he was under me, reporting to me. And he was the calmest, gentlest, just most amazing person I'd had the opportunity to interact with. And so I would hang out with him often when we were on projects after. And he told me about how every day he meditated and every day he'd read these books like Robin Sharma and all of these other greats in personal development. And so that was my introduction to personal development. I was like, wow, I want a little bit of what he has. And once I started down that path, I started to explore different teachers, different mentors, and I joined different mastermind groups. One of the things, though, that was so apparent to me everywhere that I went, whether it was a mastermind group, whether it was coaching, whether it was events, was one thing. I would go to these events and I would very often be the only person of color in the room. Often the only person of color in the room. And it struck me that why was that? Why was it that there were no people of color? Were they not invited? Were they not welcome? Was this not of interest to them? And then one of the things, too, that I realized is that we were very siloed, that while there weren't many, there were some women, men who were out there in the personal development space. But we were so siloed that they were having their events that appealed to people of color. And there were these other events hosted by different ethnicities that were just very siloed. And that bothered me a lot. It bothered me enough that I decided that I wanted to do something different. I wanted to be the change that I wanted to see in the world. And so I started work on an event. It was going to be a live event. And one of the things that I was so adamant about as I was working with my incredible creative team was that I wanted the speaker panel to be diverse. I wanted all kinds of people represented on that panel because I felt that sometimes the reason people wouldn't go to the same events that I went to was they didn't see anybody in the speaker list who looked like them. And so we started to plan this event, which was called Woman on Fire Summit. You can still find us on social media. And we had an amazing roster of speakers planned. Unfortunately, as we all know, the world happened in 2020. And so literally 2 weeks before our event, we had to make the decision to cancel. But that was really my impetus to think about, well, what could I do? What could I do to continue that momentum? And I remember as well seeing the cover of Success magazine. So it's a magazine that I sometimes pick up when I'm in the bookstore or whatever, and I see it on the shelves. I'm not a subscriber. But they had an edition which was, I can't remember the name of the edition, but it had the new thought leaders on the cover. And I remember looking at that cover, and there was not a single woman who was Black, Indigenous, or of color. They had two Black men who were on that list, and they did have a man who was of color as well. But it struck me that here was the list from Success magazine of all of what they considered the leading thought leaders in the personal development space. And there was no woman, not a single woman who was Black, Indigenous, or of color. And that was a turning point for me because up until that point, I really hadn't even considered coaching in the sense of what I do now. I was happy to host events. I was happy to be part of various communities. And as many of you know, I had the Ndini podcast. And on the Ndini podcast, I was sharing information that was inspiring and uplifting and really focused on helping women step into their most extraordinary life. But it was very focused on African women because that's why I had created that platform. Because as African women, we never really saw ourselves represented in a positive light in media. But what I also realized then was as I continued to put content out on the Ndini platform, was that the very thing that I did not like in all of these events that I went to where I was the only person of color was exactly what I was doing with Ndini. I was effectively creating another silo. And so I decided at that point that I would do something different. Of course, I had thought about Women on Fire Summit, which didn't end up happening. But I thought, how could I extend that thinking that I'd had for Women on Fire Summit to a platform that could be inclusive, that could embrace anybody and everybody? And that's where the idea for Worthy came from. That's where the thinking of what I could create and how I could create it. Now, I have to also be transparent with you and say that my self-doubt kicked in at that point because I started to question, well, who do you think you are to step into this role as a coach? What do you know? You don't have your life together. These were all the questions that circulated in my head. And you know what I did? I decided that, well, let me, so that no one can challenge me, let me get certified. So I went down this whole route of getting certified first as a life coach, then a business coach, then a productivity coach, then a habits coach, then a meditation coach. And all of this was really because I wanted to be in a position where I could say, oh, look, I have a piece of paper that says I'm qualified to talk about this. And so often, that's where we stop ourselves. We fail to trust ourselves. I failed to trust that my life experience, my experiences as a woman of color, as an entrepreneur, as a mom, all of the labels that I wear qualified me to be a coach. I didn't need an extra piece of paper that proved nothing. No one has ever come to me and said, hey, you're a life coach, show me your certificate. Or you're a meditation teacher, show me your certificate. No one has. These were all just stories that I built up in my own head about why I wasn't qualified enough to call myself a coach. And if I'm to be honest, maybe it's the reason that I still hesitate with that title. I still, to be quite honest, shy away from using that title. Because I feel like, who am I to say that I'm a coach? But that is how I ended up here. One of the reasons as well was, as I said, there seemed to be so little representation of different viewpoints, different colors, different ethnicities, different backgrounds. And so even though I was resistant to it, I felt like, if not you, then who? If you're not going to do it, then who is going to step up and do it? Who is it that your nieces and nephews will be able to see who looks like them, who's telling them that they have everything that they need within themselves to create an extraordinary life? And so that's really been my journey, a journey of fear, a journey of self-doubt that has brought me to this moment. But what I know for sure is that I'm going to do the best that I know how with what I have, that I don't need to show up perfectly. I just need to show up, that I'm learning, I'm growing. And as I learn, as I grow, I'll be sharing that with you. Thank you so much for being part of my journey. Thank you so much for supporting me. And I truly am so grateful that you are making me a part of your journey to being your most extraordinary self.